Week 19 Overview. Solomon, Divided Heart, Divided Kingdom. Solomon is a great character to study. Your younger children will learn about the art and architecture of Solomon's temple. They might put together a play about the Queen of Sheba. Older kids will see how Solomon began with humility and the fear of the Lord, but grew proud and self-reliant over time. His reign was successful by worldly standards, but it was a failure in God's eyes. There are some sobering topics for teens this week. How can a man who started off so right wind up so wrong? Solomon was the son of David and Bathsheba. Yep, the same Bathsheba with whom David committed adultery. That meant he grew up in a household with problems. After his father committed adultery and killed Bathsheba's first husband, the palace saw troubles and revolt. David promised Bathsheba that Solomon would be king, but David got old and feeble, and Solomon's brother almost seized the throne. Just in time, David had Solomon crowned king, and then he died soon after that. That left Solomon on pretty shaky ground. His father had been a mighty warrior who had a lot of wives. That meant there were plenty of other princes who could challenge his right to rule, and they did. Prince Absalom tried to take the kingdom from David by force, and David had to fight him for it. Prince Adonijah was more subtle, but just as dangerous. Some of David's top advisors had been ready to help Adonijah seize the throne just before Solomon was crowned. That meant Solomon was vulnerable, and he knew it. Perhaps that's why he offered 1,000 sacrifices to God at one time, early in his reign. 1 Kings 3 tells how the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night and said, "Ask what I shall give you." Solomon asked for wisdom to rule his people, and God gave him that and more. The Bible shows us what that wisdom looked like. The very next verse in 1 Kings 3 tells the story of two prostitutes who put his wisdom to the test. You know how it went. They each had a baby, but one rolled over on her son in the night and smothered him. Then she switched babies with the other woman. At first, the other thought her baby had died until she looked at him closely. Then she figured out what had happened. Now the two of them asked the young king to judge between them. But who could possibly tell which one of them the baby belonged to? 1 Kings 3 tells how Solomon solved the problem. He called for a sword, and he told his guards to cut the baby in half. The woman who stole the baby thought that was a great idea, but the real mother begged Solomon to let the baby live. Give him to the other woman. This is a great story. If you have any girls in the house, find a doll and have your children act it out after dinner some night this week. You get to be Solomon, of course. There are lots of great Bible stories about Solomon, but let's put them in historical context. Moses and Joshua lived 400 or 500 years earlier, around the end of the Bronze Age. By David's time, Egypt was a major power, which is why Solomon married one of Pharaoh's daughters. It was a shrewd political alliance. Solomon had a trade empire that extended amazing distances. We aren't really sure about all the place names in the Bible, but it's clear that he built a fleet in the Red Sea that would have traded with countries bordering on the Indian Ocean. Solomon gives us a perfect opportunity to talk about government and politics. He was an enormously effective king, but he single-handedly transformed Israel from a farming society with a very limited government into one vast government bureaucracy. When we studied Saul back in week 17, we heard Samuel say that a king would be more trouble than he was worth. 1 Samuel 8 says, "These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest, and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male servants and female servants and the best of your young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your flocks, and you shall be his slaves, and in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." Solomon proved just how prophetic Samuel was. He set up 12 overseers over the land to keep everything under control. He had 40,000 horses and 12,000 chariots. His vast court consumed nearly 2,000 bushels of flour and meal every day, not to mention 30 cows a day, 100 sheep, and more. He drafted 30,000 Israelite men to work for him at his building projects in monthly shifts, 10,000 at a time. They worked for him for 1 month and then went home for 2, and then they were back on duty again. He enslaved 150,000 Canaanites in the land who had managed to survive since the time of Israel's original conquest under Joshua. Solomon's most famous building project was the temple. The temple was beautiful and incredibly expensive. It was literally covered with gold. Your kids need to know about Solomon's prayerful beginnings, his glorious reign, and the beautiful temple, but they need to understand his disturbing end, too. Solomon started well, but he ended badly. When he was weak and afraid, he turned to God. When he grew stronger, he became more interested in pleasing his hundreds of wives than he was in pleasing God. In 1 Corinthians 7, Paul says, "The married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife." Solomon had a choice between obeying God and pleasing his wives. He made the same choice Adam did, with the same results. God threw Adam out of Eden, and he ripped 10 tribes away from Solomon's son, Rehoboam. The Bible doesn't condemn Solomon for his polygamy, but it judges him severely for the idolatry that went with it. Solomon was a man of peace, who built his empires with alliances instead of warfare. Royal marriages have long been a means of sealing political alliances. This helps explain why Solomon married so often. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Solomon's life seems to follow a pattern that we see over and over again in Scripture and in the world around us. Someone turns to God in their weakness, and God answers them. He meets their needs. They receive blessings and become prosperous. Then they begin to rely on their own strength instead of God's and start to compromise. God lets them go their own way, and they discover how weak they really are all over again. This pattern repeats itself with men and nations, with Christian leaders. Make sure your children see this pattern now, before they repeat it in their own lives. Make sure your children understand the glory of Solomon's reign. But as he himself said in Ecclesiastes 1, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." All of Solomon's glory, including his beautiful temple, was in vain. But that wasn't because God broke his promise. There's another son of David who doesn't have 700 wives. He only has one bride, the church. He is building us together into a temple that will never be destroyed. Solomon is a type of Christ, but he points us towards a better Prince of Peace, a better Son of David.